The following podcast is brought to you by CDKOffers.com. Use offer code BrokenSilicon for 25% off Windows codes and Die Shrink for 3% off all other codes. Links in the description, and I will say more later. But for now, let's get to the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a computer, hardware, and gaming podcast. I'm your host, Tom. As always, I'll let my guest introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Paul from Not an Apple Fan. Nice to see you all again.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who listened to Broken Silicon religiously last year definitely recognizes your voice. It's been a whole pandemic since I've talked to you.
Yeah, a whole pandemic. I built a swing yesterday. There you go. That's what I've been doing during lockdown. Built a swing for my daughter. Yeah, but other than that, pretty much nothing. Just YouTube and doing nothing really. You've been doing really well. You've been growing really fast.
I mean, yeah, I've been busy, really busy. Yeah, the Ampere video was obviously, I think, a series of videos was really the thing that starting another one of those massive growth spurts. And that one was actually funny to me. I mean, I get why, because in many ways it was kind of one of the first more comprehensive looks at Ampere. But it was a very, very funny to me. Like when I look back, I still think my Whispers of Golden Cove video from last October was significantly more comprehensive, ironclad, and well-researched. I mean, if you go back and look, everything that's come out about Ice Lake, Tiger Lake so far, and even rumors about updated rumors, which, they're not true yet, of course, about Alder Lake has come true as well. So And I guess on that note, I think I'm starting another series of Intel leaks where it's like, I don't know. It's just funny to think of myself. What I'm getting to is the Ampere guy when I really think my Intel information is probably the most accurate.
Yeah, but you see, that's probably the most accurate, and that's true. And your Intel videos were probably more comprehensive and better for somebody who's interested in Intel. But the problem is that a lot of people are interested in what the next GPU is going to be, because AMD have CPU on lockdown now, and nobody really cares about it. Everybody has got a decent CPU now, so that's the reality. Like, when would we think that we'd pay for £155? I bought a 3600 the other day for my editor, video editor. Like, that's crazy.
No, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah. So why would people get excited about the new CPU stuff when the CPU stuff is already so good now? You know what I mean? But the GPU stuff is what's really letting us down.
Well, and I guess there's actually two ways I could go with that conversation, but I guess I'll just start here because I think I saw it pop up literally like 10 minutes ago that there's a rumor coming out that AMD is deciding to delay desktop versions of Zen 3 until right before Rocket Lake's launch because they don't see a point. Like they might launch it, like they've already, I think, in an investor meeting or confirmed that Milan is coming out at the end of this year for server, but it sounds like they just don't care about desktop and they literally, in this leak, it says that they're talking how they just do not see Intel as competitive right now. There's no point of Zen 2 is selling.
Yeah, well, I think it was the retired engineer translated it from Digitimes. And
yes.
Digitimes usually bang on with this stuff, so it's kind of hard not to see this being the case, but there are some inconsistencies in that. And AMD have said RDNA 2 and Zen 3 products will launch this year, so that could mean that they're going to launch Milan. It could mean desktop CPU, but it was kind of said in terms of, because RDNA 2 is only for desktop, realistically. RDNA 2 is only a desktop, lab desktop and lab consumer product, should I say. Whereas, Milan is not a consumer product. So it's like AMD are saying one thing, they're saying another thing, but they tend to be very accurate. And if I can't see a reason why they would launch it right now, if they're selling every CPU that they can make, and they're only launching B550 now, and they know that that's going to sell out, and that gives the motherboard manufacturers another whole swath of stuff to sell. Like they're the ones that would really be pushing for a new launch. They'd be like, "You need to give us new stuff. You need to give us new stuff." But they've got new stuff now. So I just can't see them wanting to launch it other than to keep their foot on Intel's throat. And I think they should. I think it's a mistake. Intel's massive. Intel has a lot of money. Kill them while you can kill them, I think. You know what I mean?
Well, I want everything to come out as soon as possible and be as powerful as possible. But I think there's I guess I'd say a few things. Number one, and again, I haven't really looked into this, so this just popped up before we started recording. But the way I see DigiTimes is it's kind of like if they're talking about it, there's fire to that smoke always. They don't make stuff up. And if they run with something, there's something going on. But just because, for instance, and again, I haven't dug into it, something pops up from DigiTimes that's being considered or talked about, it does not mean it's going to happen, right? That's the one thing I would say. And one thing that was in that report as well is that Zen 3 is entirely on track. I mean, it was design completed last year. So I think if this was like 2017 and they were under a ton of pressure, they could get this out, this summer. They really, really, probably with a ton of BIOS issues, if I had to guess, but they could do it if they needed to. And so I just wouldn't, remember DigiTimes just said Zen 3 is coming on 5 nanometer. And then almost immediately a counter report came out saying it's not. Although were they considering putting it on 5 nanometer? Probably somewhere in the company, but doesn't mean it was some, global set in stone decision.
Also, if you look at that 5 nanometer leak, it could have meant they were considering putting Milan on 5 nanometer as well.
Right.
You don't know.
Well, and Frontier has a custom version of Milan. That's legitimately what I think that was about, that and APUs.
Yeah, and the fact that DigiTime sources are TSMC, engineers inside TSMC, they're not inside of AMD. That could mean that AMD could be having conversations with people, but nothing gets confirmed, and then you're hearing this, and then you're hearing conflicting stuff. So they're two separate companies, but they have a really close working relationship. It means they might know each other's roadmaps. I don't know, but yeah, I still don't believe it. I still think AMD should do it this year. And because I'm a YouTuber, I want it to be true because that gives me stuff to talk about.
Well, yeah, because we've had so few things to talk about lately, right? I mean, it's just been, which is why I invited you on. I mean, a lot of experts, and I had an AI developer on recently. I have someone who works on quantum computing who wants to come on soon. I have several developers I'm trying to get on, and a couple of new to the Broken Silicon YouTube channels as well. But at this point, I just don't really want to talk about new, well-researched stuff this week because I think I'm still coming to terms with everything that's came out just in the past weekend. And that's why, I'm inviting you on to just talk about it again, because I still don't think everyone's fully comprehending everything that's going on. I mean, I just received the way I would put it is compared to my Whispers of Golden Cove information from last year, the Intel info I have now is twice as thick and triple the sources. So including the sources from last year. So it's to a point where it's like, I mean, it's just this is true what I'm telling you. And when you look at Rocket Lake, which I will steer into that quickly, I think a lot of people, no matter how many times I said it in the video, are still saying, wow, Rocket Lake's going to crush Zen 3. And I'm like, I said this to a guy in the comments. I just don't know how you can draw that conclusion from this video, if you believe what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think what Intel will do is maybe keep their competitive edge in terms of single core performance.
Yeah. There will be some games they probably win still.
Yeah. That's maybe. But where AMD will still be king is they will have a gigantic core count lead still. And that's the reality. Intel will not catch up on the lead that AMD have in terms of chips, in terms of cores, until they go with chiplets. And I don't even see that on their roadmap to go with chiplets. So
next year.
Long time away. Next year. All right. Okay. I heard something like that as well myself. But I don't know. It's not exactly the same way AMD is implemented.
No.
I heard.
No, and intentionally not. I mean, I'll say that too from talking to one person. He even said I can't get into details about where it came from, but basically this is a decision that Intel wants ring bus still and smaller core counts that are really, really high IPC still, but that they understand they have a massive thread disadvantage And that's where, like, I mean, again, think Lakefield. That's a look at, I think, their strategy moving forward.
Yeah, did you hear big.LITTLE is a big part of their strategy moving forward?
Oh, it is. I'll just confirm it again right now. It is. That's their strategy, which, and I have half of the script for part 2 of my Intel leaks together. And it's like, a big point I'm going to make is, it's like, I mean, we're just going to have to see if it pans out. A lot of people didn't think Zen would pan out. So many people are saying big.LITTLE won't work on x86 and Intel's doomed. And I'm like, maybe, if it sucks, maybe it'll be another, bulldozer situation. It seriously could be. Anytime you try to do something entirely different, it could be. But Intel has the money, and I think it's going to at least be okay. And what so many people seem to miss is that modern Atom is so much better than the netbook I had in college, which was just absolute garbage. It's basically, what I hear is what will go into Alder Lake is going to be around Ivy Bridge IPC. Now, Ivy Bridge is good today. You use Ivy Bridge right now, you probably wouldn't tell that it's an older CPU. And 4 of those Atom cores takes up the same die space as one 10 nanometer, I guess, Sunny Cove core right now. I guess I don't know how big, Golden Cove cores would be. And so, is that really such a bad strategy if they're going to have 8 super high IPC cores on a ring bus for gaming, and then they can fit 4 Ivy Bridge cores in the same spaces? So you could fit 32 Atom cores in the same space that it would take 8 more. Would you not rather have 8 plus 32? I think I might, actually.
Yeah, and imagine a scenario where you're intelligently switching between game loads. 8 cores go hell for leather. I'm doing a tile-based rendering thing. I can bring the core clock down on my 8 cores, but I can throw loads of really efficient cores at the problem. Could give you a massive improvement in scores anyway for that kind of workload. So there's benefits to both, the way AMD are doing it and the way Intel are doing it. But I think Intel is coming from the perspective of, I need to be good for laptop too.
Yes.
And having those small cores means that you're good on both approaches, and it covers both sides of the equation.
I mean, Lakefield for me is incredibly impressive. It takes up, and you have to look at overall package space in the laptop. The overall footprint of a Lakefield laptop with 1 Sunny Cove core and 4 Atom cores is the half of the footprint of their Y CPUs. Those are those dual core 4-thread CPUs. That takes up twice the room of this 5-core Lakefield and uses more energy. So there's definitely some promise there. I honestly can't wait to see reviews in it, and I almost wonder where they could go with this in the future in terms of a handheld gaming device. I mean, it has the full Ice Lake graphics too. Yeah,
we've seen that what was it, Razer thing or something? Was it CEX?
Yeah, well, every company's made some portable gaming device at some point. It was the Alienware one you're probably thinking of, the UFO.
Yeah. But you could see that kind of, because the graphics on these things are going to be impressive. They're going to be RX 470 level performance, maybe.
Tiger Lake should be just about at a 560.
Yeah, so you've got 560 level graphics, which is still good for most games with low settings. So yeah, I could see that being it's going to kill something like a Switch in terms of graphical performance.
Well, that wasn't hard. Well, and so I think what I'm kind of getting to at this too is Intel can be very impressive late next year, I think. But one thing I want to circle back to about Rocket Lake is to the people that say, and this is, you heard, I said it in the video, what you're hearing if you're a 240 hertz gamer is Rocket Lake sounds like a 9900K with 20% higher IPC. How is that not going to crush AMD? And I've heard I literally saw in the comments a 20% better 9900K. How could AMD even compete with that? And I'm like, because now it uses 50% more energy, and AMD is going to have a 20% better 3950X, dude.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, imagine, right? So AMD's winning, by about 13% in IPC this time around, but
depending on the clock speed. Depending on the clock speed, though.
Yeah. Depending on the clock, as long as it doesn't go too high in terms of clock speed. But everything we're hearing seems that clock speed's getting fixed. Have you seen the 4950X? Like a 16 core part was benchmarked somewhere.
I didn't. I don't know. I think I've seen that somewhere, but I didn't see any exact scores, so I don't have a comparison point.
It's not scores that were impressive. It was the base clock.
Oh,
the base clock was higher than the 3950X's base clock now. The boost clock wasn't higher, but the base clock was higher. And if you look at the engineering sample leaks we got from the 3950X before it launched, its base clock was really low compared to what we got today. So the clock speed's looking better on Zen 3. That must mean that, because they're AMD are fools, right? So they must be doing something to the fabric clock to bring up that, boost that performance as well. Plus the fact that you've got 8 cores on a CCX.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the fabric clock, because that I think it was my last guest. How he talked about scaling IPC with clock speed, which none of these are perfect terms, but for there's a couple people in my Discord that get mad that I use the term IPC, but it's like, this is the nomenclature everyone listening understands, and I mean performance per clock per core. But the fact is, if you put a 3800X at 5 gigahertz, it actually still doesn't beat a 9900K at 5 gigahertz. And it's because you would probably need, which he says he's going to try to do this eventually just to see, a fabric clock of like 2.5 gigahertz. Like, you would need a blazing fast fabric clock. And what the thing to look for, and we've seen mixed numbers on IPC with Zen 3, and I really do have a suspicion that those mixed numbers come from the fact that at 4 gigahertz, it might only be 10 to 15% better, but at 5 gigahertz, it'll be 20% better than Zen 2, because it actually scales the IPC with clock speed because of the unified CCX. That's what I expect. And if that happens, I don't know what to tell you. We don't know that Rocket Lake will be able to hit quite the same clock speeds as Comet Lake. It's using 50% more energy. So again, this is the same situation as last year, except now Intel uses more energy and they might not clock any faster than AMD. That sounds like a clear win for AMD. And to the gamers that just keep saying, when will AMD beat Intel in gaming performance? Well, they think they don't need to. That's why they're considering delaying Zen 3. So you're such a small minority. That's how good their sales are to the gamers that say that.
Yeah, and also the fact that, like, I did a live stream last night, and like all that people kept asking about is that exact question. Or will a Zen 2 core bottleneck such an X GPU or a Y GPU? And I'm like, listen, if you look at Hardware Unbox's video where they put all of the game settings on low or medium, they were getting 300 frames per second out of a Zen 2 core. So when will a Zen 2 core bottleneck your GPU? When a GPU makes your game run at 1440p 300 frames per second. And when will that happen? About 4 generations of graphics card from now. It's ludicrous. Like, the games will always become harder to drive, always become more graphically intensive. Ray tracing is going to bring down frames per second across the board, but it's going to make a graphical fidelity much, much better. So yeah, just buy the cheapest CPU that you can afford. Buy the best CPU for you, for the money that you have, and don't worry about whether it's going to bottleneck it.
Right. And I mean, in my biggest Ampere video, one thing that I was specifically told is that Ampere is, what I think he said, catastrophically bottlenecked in 1080p. That if you buy even, and again, this is a GA102, so this is the top gaming die. He's like, even the most cut down version of this, it's like in 1080p, yeah, it might only be 20% better. I think that's another thing a lot of people are missing when they hear rumors. Is it? Some say it's 60% better. Some say it's 20% probably in 1080p. Honestly, like honestly, the top one might just be 20% better in 1080p. And I don't know why you're buying this, like, whatever, it's going to be billion transistor part for 1080p gaming. I mean, really, if you want to do esports 1080p gaming, it's probably just going to be like whatever the RDNA2 version of the 5700 XT ends up being, because that's probably the highest clock speeds in a smaller core is what you're actually going to want.
Yeah, right. Like, when you see numbers of 50% or 60% of people are on 1080p monitors, that's a real big number that everybody focuses down on. But the reality is that people who buy 2080 supers and above, those guys have the money to have a better monitor. And they might only be 10% of the market, but 10% of the market at 800 quid a chip, while it only costs maybe 100 quid more to make that chip than it does to make the lower profit margin, higher volume product. And that's, I think people don't understand industries of scale, how they make these things. They make a really low volume product with a really high margin, and then they make a really high volume product with a really low margin. And that way you make about the same money on both products, but you're servicing the entire market. And yeah, there's loads of people out there who want a 4K GPU. It might only be 10% or 5% of the market, but that's still a lot of people and a lot of sales that Nvidia wants to capture.
Well, at a certain point too, it's just, if you're Nvidia, it's like, well, what do you want us to do? Not make it get more performance? Because we've saturated 1080p. I mean, guys, let's be honest. 1080p has been pretty much saturated since Maxwell, maybe. I mean, for esports gaming, for a top end one for 1080p, it's almost ridiculous. I mean, even the consoles are going to do, although that's a whole other discussion, going to do 4K just fine. Well, probably being silent and using 200 watts at most. But let's steer into next gen graphics discussions in general, because I kind of like put together this prepared statement. You know, I think there's been a lot of competing narratives going on right now about what's going to happen. And some people are saying things like, oh, AMD's going to crush PC gaming and finally win again. Oh no, Nvidia is going to crush AMD forever with Ampere. And then of course there's a thing where people are constantly saying the consoles are going to humiliate PC. And I've kind of played with all of these narratives, but I think at this point, especially after seeing some of the more recent rumors about these graphics cards, it's like these silicon companies stopped focusing on Moore's Law a few years ago. And now we have HBM, 3D stacking, coprocessors, the consoles, and potentially in some upcoming products on PC, and a decent amount of all of these new interesting process nodes to choose between, and they're even combining different process nodes. I really think the next 3 to 5 years is going to be like 10 times more accelerated in development than what we've had in the past 3 to 5 years. And so I don't really think it's a matter of, I'm kind of changing my overall opinion just from, consoles aren't going to do this isn't going to do that. I just think everything's about to change over the next 2 years. And this idea that I should just get a console or a desktop, it's like, well, I just think if you need to upgrade, you should. And if not, wait, because whether it's a console or Ampere, it's probably going to make everything in the past 3 years look ridiculous. And yeah, although I would probably wait till the end of this year, but if you can.
I think I lived through, I know I'm a little bit older than you, Tom, but like I lived through the early noughties to the 2010 era where like all of a sudden you had 400 megahertz, gigahertz processor, first 64-bit CPU, first dual core, first quad core,
the true Moore's Law era.
Yeah, I lived through that, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. Right? Yeah, around 2013 or something, it just stopped, and like yes, things got better, but it was all iterative upgrades, and the reason why it stopped is very simple. AMD bought the only competing GPU manufacturer in the world to Nvidia. And then they stopped being able to sell CPUs because they made a terrible process node. And by those two things, AMD holding the two competitors for the two other guys, they were able to become effectively a monopoly, move up margins, stop innovating as much. And now you've got AMD back in the game on both sides. And whether it beats Nvidia or whether it beats Intel in one specific benchmark or whatever, doesn't matter because AMD are here to play now. And that means the other guys have to go faster as well. And everything has to go faster. So we're back in the early noughties again, where you're just going to see, you've already seen it. You've seen quad cores, 8 cores, 16 cores, 32 cores, 64. Yeah, you see it. Next is 128 people. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen next year, but it will happen.
You might see 72 from someone next year.
Yeah. And you're seeing, especially with compute units and SMs on GPUs now, you're seeing them begin to accelerate away again because they'd stagnated for a while. And not only that, you're seeing custom because there's no other way to scale past certain amounts of compute units.
Exactly.
You're seeing custom parts of GPUs doing custom workloads and trying to offload those workloads onto different parts of silicon as well. And then you're seeing Cortex's video on talking about, his specific leak or rumor. I think it's just a speculation.
It's a speculation, and we can talk about that if you want. I actually don't want to talk about it too much yet, but I will just say, like, I thought it was hilarious in the comments. It's like, have you seen Cortex's newest video, which we talked about the subject of it 2 days before it even went out, guys? And then he goes, you should reach out to your sources about this. And it's like, oh, thanks for the tip. It wouldn't have occurred to me to reach out to my Nvidia sources after Cortex video. You guys, I did. And at least one says it. Well, I don't want to be harsh about it, but the guy says it makes no sense. But that's just one source, and it's not. We'll call him Leather Jacket, and there's another source I'll call Green Throat, and he's the big one. And if he gets back to me, but he's not very responsive, so if he ever gets back to me, I'd be a little more confident. But I've also had someone else reach out that there's something crazy going on with Ampere, so I'm not willing to rule it entirely out. I kind of see it like the 5 nanometer Zen 3 rumor.
What I will say, and I don't like to talk a lot about things that I hear because I don't hear anywhere near as much as you guys do, right? But I genuinely hear some stuff. And what I will say is that AMD will have something that you won't be able to live without next generation.
Yeah.
And I think you know what I'm talking about. But Nvidia will also have something that you won't be able to live without. And you're going to be forced to make a decision on one of those things that you won't want to live without. That's all I'll say in that terms of that. If it's true what the guy told me,
sure.
I don't know whether it's true. Yeah, but I don't think the idea of that chip being on the back, if it does exist at all, is a goer because you've seen the fin array, and even though that's only a 3D printed whatever, you've seen it. It doesn't cool anything on the back. It's meant to.
That's what someone told me too. With
4 heat pipes, it doesn't cool anything. So. I will say that there is stuff going on the back, and I've got a video coming out today speculating on some stuff. But it's there's when's the last time we've seen a shortened PCB on a GPU?
Fury.
Yeah, what did Fury bring to the table? HBM. There might have been changes made. That's all I'm saying. But like, I don't know whether it's true or not. That was my own speculation.
So I'll give you this. One source I talked to who's, again, and there's different types of sources, right? There's people within the company. And actually, my more favorite sources often are the people that are next to the company because they have no reason to lie, right? And they usually have enough experience to just go if something's likely true or not. And one thing that was specifically mentioned, someone who does work with cards early, like he doesn't understand how they're going with GDR6 with how powerful this card is, and that looking at what Big Navi is probably bringing, it was a mistake, and that this might be entirely bottlenecked by bandwidth if they don't go with something much faster. Which, now there's those GDR6X rumors, which is hilarious too, because it's like, well, that was quick. I mean, how long did it take for us to get GDR5X? And I mean. There was always some versions of the top dies that had HBM designed. I mean, do you really think, NVIDIA wasn't designing a version of it with that? So that wouldn't at all surprise me. And man, that must mean they're scared of Big Navi. Again, just let me throw it out there.
What I will say is you've got to understand that a Titan has existed before with HBM.
Yeah.
It's Titan V. And a Titan can exist with HBM this time if the mask was already done for it. So in other words, if NVIDIA had already made a mask and they were planning to do this for a different segment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they were planning to I'm going to make this card for a Quadro or a Tesla or whatever. I think they killed one of those naming, but they're going to.
Yeah, they killed the Tesla because they think people will try to drive their graphics cards.
I think it's probably because Tesla dropped them for the self-driving cars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But so if you've already made the photo mask, why not make the GPU? If you think you're going to lose, or you think your TDPs are getting out of control, it's a big saving in terms of power.
Yeah.
Do it that way.
Which it looks like they're pushing up clock speeds, which is one thing I had in that last Ampere video I had out, which was, they're upping the clock speed even more. And, there's been a lot of conflicting rumors about the various Titans and top Amperes, that there was supposedly a GA101 at one point, but that it was killed. And again, so it's like, if you guys think NVIDIA didn't design all of these different things in case they wanted to release it ahead of time, it's like, what? I mean, for instance, there was that Navi 12 that never came out until now, apparently. Apparently today, an HBM version of the 5700 XT is out for Apple. I assure you, AMD had that design done a year ago, and they just decided to release it now.
That's the basis for my video today. It's with the editor right now. I hope he's doing a good job. First time he's editing this video. But yeah, so that was the basis of the start of the speculation on the HBM. Is like, you know, if they could do it with Navi 10, yes, the die. If you've seen the die shot, it's completely different in terms of its design. It has different memory controllers in different places and different, you know.
It's its own different die. It is not just a Navi 10. That's how I can describe it, but it isn't just a Navi 10.
Yeah, exactly. So if you know, Navi was always able to work with HBM, well, then AMD could have always made a HBM card if they wanted to. It's a matter of investing 100 million, which is a lot. But for the sales they'll get back, it's not a lot of money in the long term. And if it takes them to win, or it takes them to get under a specific TDP envelope, and they can do it. And remember, graphics cards are 1,200 quid now, which means that HBM is not too expensive anymore. You know, because AMD is operating on a 50% margin, Nvidia is operating on a 65% margin. So AMD can be that little bit more expensive to manufacture. Yeah, so there's a lot of room there to maneuver in terms of how you're going to build out your GPU. But I think the key point that I want to talk about, and I think a lot of maybe my viewers, probably not yours, always go, but Tom said this, so clearly he's wrong. Or Tom, you know.
No,
and I'm like, what Tom's leak was from.
Exactly.
Was from a dude sitting, or a dude hearing or sitting in front of.
Well, there's a few people, but one of them is someone who has their hands on it. I'll say that.
Yeah. Hands on an engineering sample that's not finalized.
Correct.
And could always change.
Correct.
So this is the reason why I don't do leaks sometimes. Like I do drop hints, but I don't do leaks.
When it comes to leaks, I've just come to the conclusion of like, I'm just going to be as clear as I can in my videos. The stuff I'm 100% sure about, the stuff I'm speculating about, and the stuff that other people have talked about. So probably backs this up. And I just try to make it as clear as possible. And it's like, I think it's when you start taking yourself too seriously and kind of mixing when you're speculating and when you have leaks that I think people get the most mad, is what I would also say.
Yeah, what I think I get a bit annoyed when people don't listen. It really infuriates me to the point where maybe I do take myself too seriously. Because I've clearly said this might not be true before Zen 2 launched. In Discord, privately. I didn't say it on a video, but I was like, well, in a video I said it's my own speculation. But actually, realistically, what I was saying was, these things are not going to hit 5 gigahertz. I don't know what happened with Jim's leak, but it's not going to happen. I know what the clock speeds are going to be. I've been told. I have somebody who's benchmarking it right now. It's not happening. There might have been 5 gigahertz, Zen 2 parts. Absolutely. In fact, every part that sits in your PC now might do 5 gigahertz on a single core.
Yeah.
But the problem is that there's no point in doing it, as we found out.
Yes.
Zen does not scale past about 4.4 gigahertz.
Exactly.
Therefore, there was no reason in having a 5 gigahertz part.
I mean, like, what would it have even done? It would have probably been like still 2% worse at gaming than the 9900K, and it now would have been like a 200 watt part. I mean, and it would have been the best samples too, which should probably just be going into Epic. So what's the entire point of that? Now I will say this though, Matisse 2 could be a different situation, which was another thing I kind of wanted to get back to talking about as well. Is, you know, there is also, if we do see them confirm Zen 3 coming out next year, which I think it would still come out very early next year before Rocket Lake. If they do that though, like that could indicate Matisse 2 has like the stock fabric clocks that are higher. And there's a lot of evidence it really does boost 5 to 10% higher than on average in a game than the other one. And well, and again, right, an overclocked Comet Lake will probably still beat it in gaming. But at stock settings, it might just match or even beat Comet Lake. And if they can do that, and Rocket Lake's been, well, I'm not delayed. It was always really going to come out in Q1. Then why release Zen 3 if they can just do this too?
Yeah, what I will say is somebody said something to me, and I don't know how true it is, but like I read it somewhere else afterwards about I've known about you've known about Matisse 2 since like February or March or something, right? I've known about it pretty much as long as then as well. But like I didn't know what it was. I thought it maybe would have been an 8-core relaunch of Zen or whatever. But somebody said it's on 7 nanometer P because 7 nanometer P is compatible with 7 nanometer. So N7 and
I've been thinking that too. Yeah.
are compatible. So it requires no extra photo mask. So it doesn't require any extra work.
Exactly.
Put it on that process. So it could.
This is the easiest refresh ever too. It costs them nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And also the fact of the matter is, if it's on that, then it's better quality silicon. Better quality silicon means everything will clock higher, including like a memory controller.
Yes.
A fabric clock could go higher as well. So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that was. I mean, you can just look at how much higher some of these parts are clocking right now on their own too, without even having a rename. I mean, I've got endless examples of people in my Discord in the comments who have said, yeah, no, I have because there's some people who love overclocking and tweaking, and they'll just buy multiple processors every month to overclock for fun, see if they can get a better sample. And it's like, oh yeah, at launch it was like 1.4 volts, and I could get to like maybe 4.3 gigahertz all core with the 3600. And now they're like, I'm at 4.5 gigahertz all core at 1.2 volts. This is an entirely different CPU. And when you see that, it's like, yeah, that AMD is probably going to keep the same TDP. In fact, I thought maybe they'd push it to 125 watts, but it sounds like it's not even necessary. Just that. And, N7P is like 15% better than N7 or something. So they can just push it probably to 10% higher clocks and 10% everything. And again, that's it then. Comet Lake's dead at that point. So let me switch gears here a little bit. Well, I guess before I switch gears, let me just round out the Ampere thing too. I guess the last thing I wanted to say about that is, and kind of also pulling together what you said about people saying, this other guy said this, so you're wrong. It's like, I think what really also blows me away is how often people think we contradict each other when really not so much. If you go to my Ampere leak, I said it's going to have wildly better ray tracing performance. Like ray tracing performance, I was almost nervous to tell people but I got firm numbers. So it's like, okay. I mean, and honestly, this is what I expected Nvidia to do, to like at least double, quadruple ray tracing over Turing. And so if you look at, just to bring up Cortex's leak one more time, most of what he said doesn't contradict anything I said. If anything, it would explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it would explain the reason why. What I will say is that I've heard, and I don't know whether it's true or not, again, but Navi's ray tracing performance is not as good as Ampere, maybe just as good as Turing's.
You mean RDNA2?
Sorry, RDNA2. Yeah. So its ray tracing performance is somewhere around Turing's ray tracing. But what I'm worried about, like what I'm concerned about that is that poor CU, or is that like
exactly?
You know what I mean, because if it's poor CU, then it's going to have more CU, so it's going to be better again.
Exactly.
Is it per clock? Because then clock speed,
it's going to be clocked a lot faster. Yeah. The way and again, it's like, let's be honest, compared to previous AMD graphics card releases, this one's been kept pretty quiet actually for the past year. There were some decent leaks actually, mid last year that I think were mostly true. But since then, again, knowing core count doesn't really tell you that much anymore. It's all about what other capabilities the architecture has. And so my opinion, and this is just complete opinion, is to what I expect out of RDNA2's ray tracing performance is maybe slightly better ray tracing per CU than Turing per SM, but it's also clocked, 30-40% faster with substantially more CUs. So in other words, I kind of expect top RDNA2 to ray trace substantially better than top Turing, but for Ampere to still win in ray tracing quite handedly. But they should both be able to do it. And one source said that AMD wants to market the top RDNA card as a 4K 120 ray tracing card. So, which NVIDIA will do the same thing. So, and that's the thing where it's like, as much as I don't have like an Ampere level leak, if you will, about Big Navi, I do have a couple people who are under NDA who will drop me a hint here and there. And everything they say is that RDNA2 is incredibly good at machine learning. If that's true, then why would it not be good at all of these other DLSS type functions, ray tracing functions that Ampere has? And for Christ's sakes, the PS5 does 2.2 gigahertz in a console. Do you guys really not think a desktop card is going to be faster than that? So I just, something I keep telling people is, it's like, as much as I think Ampere will probably keep the top performance crown because they're just going to unleash everything, I do think you've got to remember that AMD is not dumb or incompetent, and they are very aggressive right now. Whatever you're hearing about how crazy Ampere is, the way I would put it is AMD probably has some sort of answer. I really doubt they have nothing.
What I've been really trying to get somebody to give me information on this one specific thing, right? So I tweeted out last night looking for somebody to say, like, I talk to a lot of the same people you talk to,
yeah.
right? Let's just be, right? So, but I tweeted out last night, I'm still not sure on ADCUs.
Yeah.
You see my tweet. I'm still not sure on ADCUs. That would be the final puzzle piece or something like that. I said, just hoping that somebody would get back to me in a DM or send me a mail or something that would, confirm that for me. And it's so hard. Like I've pretty much said in about 50 videos.
Yeah.
Ampere is going to have 5,000 plus shaders.
Oh yeah. We've known that for a while.
Yeah. I've said think Titan V level shaders. That's what I've said for the longest time, right? You can kind of confirm that nearly last year, right? But I can't get anything that confirms ADCUs. Like some random guy.
The original leaks. That's it.
Yeah.
And those are like a year old.
Yeah. I just can't hear anything else then. So, and my gut has always told me that it's going to be around 64.
Again, the magic 64 from AMD.
Yeah. I don't know why. Not because it's magic, just because like I think 360 or 70 millimeter squared is like for price to performance on the 7nm node.
Well, there could be both though, right? There could be a 64 CU die and an 80. I doubt they would just make. I was thinking about that, right? I doubt they would just make an 80 die and then nothing below it but 40.
Well, we've seen those leaks of 505, 360. 240, and they all make sense in terms of numbers, but that could be just some dude sitting in his room, as clever as both me and you are, looks at all this stuff all the time, just made it up, and it might look right. And it, like, you can kind of, like, you can sit down with Ampere and you can sit down with a calculator and figure out what the die size is going to be, because you've got all the information, right? You've got how big it scales up in terms of from Titan V to GA100 or whatever. You've got all that information, so you can sit down with a calculator and figure out roughly what the die size is. So there could be guys out there doing this all the time and leaking.
I'm sure they are,
Yeah.
And I've received stuff like that, and someone said, why haven't you paid attention to this chart? And I'm like, I'm just not. It just seems like a chart someone put together. You can never be 100% sure, but I guess the one thing I would say about die size, someone asked me this question too, which I think is an interesting point. Like Adorna, that RDNA2 video come out, which I actually watched before he pulled it, and he pulled it because he got confirmation that at least a large part of what made him believe the rumor sounds like it wasn't true. But I thought it's unfortunate because I actually thought a lot of that video made some really good points, and if you'd have just made it a smaller video, it would have been fine. And one thing that he talked about is how AMD might push the top card to like 400 watts, which it sounds like, again, that source was BS according to him. But, that's something I could see AMD doing. If AMD, the rumors this whole time is they've had power usage issues with the larger dies, but let's say they fix the performance at the very least, and they come to the conclusion, our 80 or whatever, our 500 millimeter squared die beats top Ampere if we overclock it to 400 watts. Let's just do it. And if I was AMD, I would say it's worth it. Because if you take the top performance crown, Most people aren't. I mean, we've learned this from Intel. Most people aren't even buying the top chip anyways. But if they see AMD dethrone Nvidia for even a week, I think the brand recognition, it would pay so many dividends just to have 1 week where they're like, nope, AMD is the strongest. So I can see that happening.
Yeah, that's why I was like, release big Navi now. Months ago, I was like, just release it now. Just get it out. Because I don't even want them to risk it. But it tells you how much AMD believes in big Navi. Because they're playing chicken with release dates. Both of them are playing chicken. Both of them are like, I'm going to launch now, or I'm going to... And there's all of these leaks around rumors of release dates. And I think that's just the two of them fucking with each other, to be honest. Because one of them wants to fire a shot one wants the other to fire the shot first, so they can beat the other in terms of either performance or price to performance, right? And Nvidia's scared this time around because you can see it, right? I don't know how true those leaks are, because there's one thing that I know is not true. And that's all I can say. So I know one thing is not true. So therefore, and I think something you said even disproves some of that stuff as well. So I think that even not all of those leaks from Igor's labs are true.
Well, a lot of my information actually lines up pretty well with Igor's labs, to be entirely honest. You might have to spell it out for me. What I would say is that every Ampere leak, half of the stuff lines up with each other, and it just doesn't surprise me if something's different.
Yeah. It's around memory, but like, I just think that number one, let's just spell the obvious out. And the one thing I will speak about is GDDR6X.
Yeah.
That just banged of bullshit to me straight away, right? And because it would be so much cheaper to do a bigger memory bus. Find a cleverer way to do a bigger memory bus than it would be to go with like a new type of memory that clocks so much higher and it would be more expensive and put 24 gigabytes of it on. I'm not saying there's not going to be 24 gigabytes because 3090, I'm not sure about either. I'm not really sure about that. It's that like Nvidia.
Well, I mean, so there's all this stuff, right? The original leak said 16 gigabit per second, and then mine said 18, and then other people's actually said 18 as well. And then I actually
18, I believe.
Yeah, and I know that there's been 18 on some. Actually, I know some console dev kits had 18 gigabit per second because you can do it. You can overclock some of the best GDR6 chips in low volumes right now to 18 gigabit per second. It's just not really production ready probably till this fall to be mass produced at that high of a speed. And when I saw 21, and I received information that there was 21, but the source said again, like they don't really, Nvidia doesn't tell you anything you're working on because they don't want you to know. But like they said it was running at 21 gigabit per second, but they didn't say GDR 6X. They just said, if that's a thing, maybe, and I don't know how fast they're able to get their hands on. I guess the one thing I would say about all of these rumors is it's just like, there's so many different things that could be going on right now. This is the time where we're getting 1,000 rumors a week, and you have to kind of really wonder how many of them can be true. I mean, Nvidia could just really be, it could just be they already had it designed and they're just pushing it as far as they can go. And they're like, what do we feasibly think is the fastest memory we'll be able to get our hands on this fall? And maybe it'll be a paper launch again,
Yeah. What I will say is, and as I said, everything I say is completely subject.
This is a very speculation-ish video. Podcast, exactly, you guys. So don't hammer us about this.
Yeah. I was told GDDR6 is bullshit. That's what I was told, right? 100% GDDR6 is bullshit. But that doesn't mean that there's not 21 gigabits per second memory. It just means that GDDR6 is bullshit. That name GDDR6 is bullshit. So when you're told that, and then you kind of already, before you even told that, you look at it and you go, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you have to question all of the other information because of that one thing that for me was glaringly obvious. But yeah, in saying that, I think it makes sense. You heard the gym thing because you obviously seen the video before it's taken down of changing the name to 90 so that they don't get their brand Titan beaten and all that kind of stuff.
Or that they can sell their top die that should be a Titan for 1,500 or something or 2,000 and not technically lower the price of what a Titan is. As they prepare maybe a stronger Titan too to be launched above it for who knows $4,000 at this point.
Yeah. So as I said, it does start to make sense, but at the same time, I'm like, is Nvidia is Jensen just dicking with us? Because he liked that little gag when he was releasing the 20 series. Is like the GTX 1180, and he's like, nobody knew that it was actually the 20 series. When Jim had leaked it all a week beforehand. But anyway, is he just sticking with us? Is he just releasing all this stuff to kind of play? Because they're both playing espionage with each other.
It's especially AMD now. That's when I just went, I'm done. I think I might be done covering some of these AMD leaks for a while, because when I saw AMD Warhol, I'm like, that's bullshit. That doesn't make any sense. And look, people may in a year or two from now say, here's, I found one minute section where Tom was wrong about AMD Warhol, but it's like 7 nanometers Zen 3 Warhol the day after a 5 nanometers Zen 3 rumor, and it's Vermeer that's Zen. Why would they go 7? All right, guys, I'm now very sure half of this stuff coming out is just bullshit leaks trying to confuse people. And I know that AMD specifically, I've been told AMD is trying to stop this leaky ship they've had in the past. And so that they are intentionally like putting at the end of meetings bullshit stuff and then seeing which groups leak it so they can kind of get closer to the terrorist cell of leaks one by one.
Yeah, that's why there's no AIB partner models at launch. Because they're the leakiest fucks alive, and they have to know all of the information before a card comes out because they have to design a cooler for it. So don't give them anything. Give it to them after launch and let them work on their designs then, because they're leaky as, they are. Some of my sources are AIBs, and they're incredibly leaky for sure. So remember we heard the price of Navi before it was even launched, before it was even announced. We knew the price of Navi because I think Sapphire or something came out, and was it Sapphire? I think it was.
They just said it.
Guys was like, he's like, they're going to be like around $400, $500. I was like, what?
And he just said that like it was so casually, like it didn't even matter to him.
Yeah, because all of those sneaky Europeans won't be able to understand whatever language you're speaking. But yeah, we did. We translated.
Yeah. Well, let me steer the conversation a little bit. We've spent a lot of time, and this is just kind of more of a more casual episode where we're just. I mean, again, guys, don't take any of this as us 100% confirming. Although I think you can tell which things me and you are sure about, hopefully. But I want to steer it a little bit more into the consoles. I actually have been neglecting some of these reader mails. I've been enjoying talking with you so much so far.
Bang a few of them out. We'll just answer them.
Yeah.
Rapid fire, and then we'll go on to some other topic.
For my new benchmarking station, I did use a legitimate key of Windows 10 Professional, and that's because it's just not expensive if you go to CDK Offers. They did sponsor me to say this, but I used their website, and it works well. They have great customer support, and if you use offer code BrokenSilicon, you'll get 25% off Windows software, and Die Shrink gets you 3% off all software on the website, including game codes. I will reiterate, it was really easy for me to actually set up an account on this website, search for Windows, buy the code using whatever payment method I wanted, and they do have several options, and then I simply got sent the authentic key and downloaded Windows 10 from Microsoft's website. Save yourself some money to get more bones for your dog, and don't stress yourself out using illegitimate keys. These are real keys, and they did sponsor this part of the video, so one more time, that's cdkoffers.com. Use Die Shrink for 3% off all software on the website, including Steam games, and Broken Silicon for 25% off software. All right, now let's get to the benchmarking.
Yeah, so VI Pass says Linus app. Yeah, so I'm just going to kind of paraphrase. Let's go step by step here. There's a lot of things you mentioned there, VI Pass. Number one, there was the Linus Tech Tips apology video. Number two, there's the idea that PCs will hold back consoles. And then number three, there's the discussion about if they'll be able to make games on all of these. And I'll just rapid fire. I think I'll go backwards, actually. So I continue to think this idea of one holding the other back is kind of like the whole point of the Unreal Engine 5 demo that everyone seems to keep missing isn't that you will need an SSD, I think, for a lot of games, but that there are multiple ways of scaling performance. You can have a more powerful CPU, you can have a more powerful GPU, you can have more RAM, so you don't need as powerful as an SSD because you'll just put more in the RAM. And if you have powerful I/O, you can use it to more rapidly stream in assets quicker, which is a performance benefit. So again, I just think what we're going to see is engines that scale performance in more than a few ways. And then in terms of holding things back, it's again, people look at Ampere and they go, and maybe Big Navi and go, see, consoles suck. And it's like, yeah, those consoles are going to be a lot cheaper and not everyone's going to buy Ampere on day one. It's really budget PC builds that I think are the sticking point here. And then now let me go to the first one where I'll let you start talking, which is the Linus Tech Tips apology video. Did you see that? Let's start there then.
I think it was the best apology.
Oh yeah.
Done. Very, like he basically cast a light in his own ignorance and said, "Look, I just didn't look into it. I opened my mouth before I shouldn't." And dude didn't even say what I said he said. So look, I'm sorry on all of that. And it was just very well done. And there's nothing else you can say other than everybody should know that what consoles are doing is unbelievably impressive.
Yeah.
You cannot, unless you're an engineer right now, you can't understand it. But I think Ratchet and Clank probably.
Oh, it showed it.
PS5 demo.
It's real.
It showed you what's possible, and that is just bigger worlds, more epic worlds. But I will say, on terms of PCs holding consoles back, PCs have more RAM. PCs will have probably, not confirmed, have more VRAM to access. So you could always do clever things with that. And yeah, that's all I'll say on that at the moment. But yeah, there's some more interesting stuff that Tom knows what I'm talking about as well. Whether it's RDNA 3 or RDNA 2.
Oh, and yeah, see, that's the problem is I don't want to, and I have been sharing notes with a couple other tech tubers just because no one, like, we just don't feel like we can talk about what we think we might know about the consoles that much right now, just because the fanboys will just scream at us. I mean, can you believe after I did a live stream after the PS5 announcement, and I was called a Xbox fanboy in a video where I was overwhelmingly positive about the PS5. But, I would say, well, that was stupid, though. That doesn't make sense. I think they should do this, though. And I think that's a mistake. And just because I said anything negative, and so it's like this problem of like, I'm just, like a few years ago, I thought, I don't know, maybe AMD and Nvidia fanboys are worse than Xbox and PlayStation. Wrong. No. I take it back. I immediately take it back. And I said that to one of my best friends too. I'm like, was it this bad before? And he goes, fuck yes. It was insane before. You've just forgotten. And so I'm sitting on some information. The one thing I will bring up from it though, that is interesting, and I only heard this yesterday, and it's kind of a source from a source. So keep in mind that I'm not 100% confirming it, is it's like, Horizon's coming to PC because it's already saturated the PlayStation market. And frankly, it looks like they might bundle it with Ryzen CPU. So when people see that, I'm like, dude, they're putting a PlayStation ad on every AMD CPU.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen that. Yeah, I heard you. Yeah, I must have watched that live stream then.
I'm like,
if I heard you.
That's why they're doing that. Like anyone who's going to buy it on PlayStation has bought it. So that's why they're doing that, is it's an ad for PlayStation. And I have been told again that they're going to bring Bloodborne to PC. And again, that makes sense because there's already a big Dark Souls following on PC. So bringing Bloodborne, it'll sell incredibly well. And that Sony is looking to just keep doing this. But again, my understanding is not every game. They plan to keep the majority of their games exclusive. But what they'll do is they'll say, hey, we know that has a big market on PC potentially. So let's port that one 3 or 4 years after it comes out. And right now they're doing early looks into how they'll port PS5 games to PC. And they said, yeah, we're just going to have to wait a few years, first of all. But it looks like at the very least, it'll require a Gen 4 SSD and at least 32 gigabytes of DDR. And it still has performance issues in some of the games where, again, it's not like they ported anything. They've just done some light mini port testing. And they're like, they might need to wait for like 64 gigs of RAM to be standard with like 16 gig graphics cards and Gen 4 SSDs. So, I mean, there's kind of answering. I bring that up because, I mean, I don't know if you have any comments on that with regards to PC holding it back.
I think that there will be things, and I can't speak to which architecture it will be, but I think there will be things that will enable PC not to hold it back.
Yeah. Oh, you mean with RDNA 3 on PC?
I'm not saying which architecture, but I'm just saying on both sides of Nvidia and AMD. But I'm not saying which, like whether it's like a year from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now. Yeah, there will be something.
Well, again, the way I look at it is I don't think it's nearly, I think, again, what my main point is, I think a lot of people assume it's hard to make a game on PlayStation or how should I put this, right? They think it's hard to leverage the SSD and the PS5 and the Xbox for performance benefits. And that's just so not what anyone's told me. Every developer says it's literally built to be easy to get more performance out of what they've done, because otherwise it would have been pointless. They don't want this just for exclusives. And so I just think it's like, look, PC is going to have more brute force and Ampere with NV cache potentially, although I heard they might limit that to professional cards and high bandwidth cache for our basically a high bandwidth cache 2.0 eventually. And who knows? I've speculated they could put, big SSDs that are lightning fast on the graphics card itself. There's all of these solutions there. In the meantime, there is just also brute force. And I think the boring answer is this is a efficient way to design a console. It will have performance benefits. And the only casualty of this is going to probably be budget builds this year. Yeah. Like that's the true casualty. It's not because devs aren't going to, I guess what I want to say, let it hold it back. They're just going to make sure it runs on PC, but you might have to turn down more settings for some builds.
Yeah. PCs don't need to be efficient. That's the most important thing to remember. I have a 1000 watt PSU. They don't need to be efficient. It's nice if they are, but they don't have to be entirely efficient. So that's one way they could make up the performance difference. But yeah, my understanding of how you write for an SSD in terms of how you bring all of that performance to bear, and I do not know as much as the guy you had on talking about SSDs, probably not. But my understanding is that it's actually really difficult to write for a hard drive.
Relatively, yeah.
Really hard to write for like a disk, basically. So this is actually a breath of.
Oh yeah, disks were a nightmare.
Yeah, well, it's very similar. They're both spinning, so and just the way it's always been done. But they've wanted to do it a different way for so long, and now they're getting it, and it's easier to do it this way. So, in fact, this is an implementation that developers are crying out for because it's easier for them to it saves them time.
Edward Villanovo writes in, and he says, do you think CPUs will start incorporating mini CPU cores, maybe even ARM ones, on the I/O dies to improve throughput for certain tasks in a manner similar to the I/O controller for the storage in the PS5? So let me just say, my answer for this is, if they have 8 Atom cores in Alder Lake, that might do that.
Yeah, that's why I would say yes. I'd say that CPU manufacturers are always looking for clever ways to increase performance, and if it can increase performance and it's an easy win for them, they'll do it. So that's probably a quick answer on that one.
Well, and I think the honest answer is I expected perhaps them to throw some I/O coprocessors into Zen 3, maybe Zen 4. I can't say who it is because this is someone, if I said his name, you know who it is. It's not a tech tuber, but he's someone who really knows a lot about what's going on in the background. And he just openly talked to me one day about a few things. And he said, as far as he's aware, Zen 4 is going to be crazy. It's going to be kind of in between that full 3D stacking and non-full 3D stacking. It's kind of like a 2.5D situation. And as far as he's aware, there still aren't these super extravagant co-processors. The way you scale performance is you just have a more powerful core than the consoles, potentially, is what's going to happen. Yeah. And I think people are underestimating, it is pretty simple if you think about it, right? They said the PS5 has an additional coprocessor that's 9 Zen 2 cores equivalent, and then one that's 2 more. So that's 11 plus 8, 19, but it's clock slower than a 3950X. We're already going to get Zen 3. We're already going to get, all these. I think that's kind of the simple answer as well, is our CPUs are going to keep getting stronger over the next few years, and that might just handle it.
My question would be who makes those coprocessors? That's my question. I need to know who makes them. I need to know where they're manufactured, and I need to know who owns the intellectual property on those CPU, those coprocessors. And when I know that, I can give you probably a better answer on that question. But I will say that the main direction CPUs are probably going in terms of increasing performance is getting memory closer to the die. So getting memory closer to the CPU cores. Intel are going by stacking the memory on top. AMD are going to probably put it beside the core.
All right. Master Chef writes in and he says, do you guys feel that the new GPU architectures coming out, discrete and consoles, both of them, are going to move the bar higher and faster than previous generations, essentially, actually, what I want to know is, do you think that in a couple years, Polaris, Vega, RDNA1, Turing, all of these are just going to fall by the wayside quicker than we're used to and not hold their value on eBay as well?
Yes, I think that anybody who bought a Turing card should sell it now. Navi 1 is not the full implementation of RDNA, and I would get rid of that as well as quick as I could, because they're probably... AMD don't have the software developers that Nvidia have either, so they don't have the resources to look after architectures for as long. The reason why we got a fine wine with GCN is because that's the only architecture they had for the longest time. So I'd say probably, get rid of your graphics cards now, buy something cheap and wait for the new stuff. And then you'll probably get a long lifetime. But in terms of ray tracing, that's where everything's going now. It's on the consoles, so therefore it's gonna be the future. Get a ray tracing card as soon as you can, except for don't buy a Turing card, because they're not as good, and they're never going to be as good.
No,
as like I'm always been saying, ray tracing will be a thing when you can get 2080 Ti level ray tracing in a $200 card.
Mm-hmm. Which it sounds like we might get even more than that with Ampere.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, what do you think we're going to get next generation round? We're probably, well, maybe $350 card, but yeah, that's what we're going to get next generation round.
Well, so it's funny though. I watched while I was working. I just put it on in the background. Digital Foundry's kind of reaction videos to a few things, including the PlayStation 5 announcement, and they were kind of on the fly analyzing the resolutions as they were watching it, the frame rates. Although again, it's like a trailer half the time, so there's not too much you can draw from that, but they were able to. The most interesting thing I found was their analysis of the ray tracing in those trailers, and which ones they thought were partially real time. And they said, yeah, this is pretty easily in these trailers doing ray tracing substantially better than a 2080 Ti can. So just right there, right? And what's in the play? And again, it's, everyone, God, 2 years ago, and I said, I think the consoles will be around a 2080 Ti. They will have fast SSDs, and they will have 8-core Zens, or whatever the newest Zen architecture is. And everyone called me an idiot because that would cost $2,000. And I'm like, give it 2 years, guys. And
yeah, we were on the same page.
We were, yeah.
It's going to be 2080 Super or 2080 Ti level performance.
Which, relatively speaking, the difference on a console is like, this is something that lasts for like 5 years. So, and what you got to understand is the consolation prize is there will be a 6700 XT, probably a version of the PS5, probably for $400 if I had to guess. And so there you go, guys. That is the consolation prize. And as far as we can tell, even AMD's is probably going to do RT as well as a 2080 Ti for $400. I mean, their top card may not beat the top Ampere, but it's just, I don't know. I don't think we're going to be at the point where we have global illumination on every game. Like Cameron Alexander says he wants that here. He wrote in as well. But it's like, I think we're going to get some early indie games that might actually do it. Honestly, a couple.
I think this is the generation where GPUs are good enough to do global illumination in decent games, but you'll probably have to pay for it. Like this is still where you might have to buy like an 80 class card to get that kind of level of ray tracing performance. Whereas you're stepping down to selecting features, you'll have a slider. Like, do you know what I mean? Like the way we do now. But instead of sliding the amount of rays you're doing in just reflections, you might be turning off. Or you might have like check.
Yeah, you could literally just have a slider though if you wanted to. That would be probably the easiest way. And then they could also just have recommendations like, hey, you've got a Turing card, so it's got to be on ultra low.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even a 2080 Ti, you got to put it on ultra low. Yeah, your $1,200 graphics card is now shit.
Well, yeah, and this is an advantage where, like, Alex T. Punk writes in and kind of asks what the difference will probably be. I think we've already kind of given our opinion on where we see it falling, but one advantage that consoles have as well is, like, unfortunately, until we are fully doing global illuminated ray tracing as the standard, I really think that the consoles will have a, what do I want to say, like a programming to the metal advantage with ray tracing, because they can just make sure only ray trace that type of object, only that type of object in this scene, and they can make sure it's only the stuff you'll notice. Whereas on PC, you need a lot more ray tracing brute force, because devs don't want to have to go in and do that for every single series, architecture, and graphics card. And that's where the consoles, it's like, well, no, they can do that. There's 2 consoles, and they can just sit there and say, this one can handle this type of ray tracing well, and blah, blah, blah.
You know, that's where the slider comes in as well, really, isn't it? Where devs can sit there and take it out of your hands rather than having boxes that you tick. Devs will be like, okay, right, you should be able to put it on whatever slider you want, and we know it'll work on maybe, let's say, a 6700 XT and a 3060 Super or 3060 or whatever it is. You know.
I guess let me say this too. Then let's get into like what did you think of how the PS5 looked? I'm just curious what you think.
I love the Seto Kaiba. I'm big into the Seto Kaiba. I think it looks better than I'm gonna go with against the grain on this one. I think it looks better than a lot of people think the Xbox looks better. I think it looks better. I don't like white because I have a 2-year-old daughter and smudgy hands. You know, you ever see white plastic? Like, if you had a white phone, you put it in your denim pocket and it just picks up those blue stains and you can never get them off. I think it looks really cool. I think a black one would be really, really cool. I think they're going to do black, so that'll be awesome.
I've seen a lot of people say that too, that they just want a black one, which I think there was a rumor they're going to have a few special editions at launch anyways. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. I really don't know what to say about how the PS5 looks, just because if you ask my opinion, I don't care that much how these consoles look if you really boil it down. I've never looked at, I mean, I think the later gen Xbox Ones look really cool, the compact ones. And I think the launch PS4 looked really cool. But outside of that, like almost any console you show me it, and I'm like, I don't know, it looks fine. And I think Sony intentionally went with, well, clearly, right? I'm sure they thought about it, went with a divisive design to make people talk about it. I honestly think that was their plan.
Yeah. Like I think this is why all companies do this, is to make you talk about it. Like if you look at the 1080, everybody hated that design when it leaked. You look at the leaked designs for the 3080, everybody's hating those as well. But they're all talking about it. That's all they're doing is talking about it. Makes you wonder, was it really a leak or was it intentionally leaked? And then you look at the console and the memes were everywhere for days afterwards. Like, and the same with the Xbox, the memes. Oh, it just looks like it looks like the PC. It just looks like a PC, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's amazing. I think it's amazingly big. Like
it is huge.
It'd be that big.
No, it's even bigger than I thought it would be bigger. It's not. Right, it's not as big as some people would make it out. It's still smaller than almost any PC, but there's no way around it. It's at least 20% bigger than I thought. I thought it'd be their biggest console ever, but I didn't think it'd be quite that big.
Yeah. Well, it's big, and it's. I think it's beautiful, and I think it's gonna bring.
Oh, you said beautiful. You're now a Sony pony officially to the people listening.
Yeah, well, I will probably be one of those ones that buys the Xbox, to be honest. I just prefer the controller, so that's just the only reason why I prefer Xbox is the controller. I like the off. So would Sony please just give us the choice? Put off axis.
I'm pretty sure there's custom ones you can get right now. I actually like the I don't know what you call it, horizontal same plane not. I like the non-offset one more actually. So that's why, is they probably focus test this, and it's like some people like that, some people don't.
Yeah. But for me, that's just the way I like the whole mic, and I like the chunkier controller. I think they're going chunkier this time around, so I don't know. Maybe I have to hold the controller and decide for myself. But yeah, I think maybe I'll probably get an Xbox this time around. I like, if you want to know my console history, it was like PlayStation, Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any like PS1, PS2, Xbox 360, Xbox.
This is interesting. So now they can paint you as either an Xbox fanboy or a PlayStation fanboy. But,
yeah, they can go to war.
You see how hard that was, though, fanboys listening? He said a bunch of good things about the PS5 and then said he's getting an Xbox. It's not hard to do. But I think another thing I want to touch on about the consoles is just that when people look at how impressive Ampere, and again, we're assuming RDNA2 will be, I really, really think the consoles are going to cost less than people think. Like, I can't get over it. I keep redoing my estimated bill of materials. And what I come to the conclusion of is unless there's some unless they're like bundling in a ton of crap, which they might with one version, it almost looked like I really think both consoles can be below $500. I really, really do. And you know, the digital and non-digital announcement Sony made is, I'm also like 75% sure Sony will refuse to say the price until Xbox does, actually.
Well, you see, I'm on the other side of the fence. I think they're going to be more expensive. I don't think they're going to be ludicrous. I've heard ludicrous numbers, right? I think 600 for one and maybe 650 for the other one. That's what I think. Because I think that, right, 700 quid in 2006 or whatever, when the consoles was 700 quid. It was a lot of money. But nowadays, 700.
Well, there's inflation.
Current economic climate, maybe it is.
I think there'll be more than last gen. I do think that.
Yeah. So, what I say is the digital edition can be sold for a lot less, because that means you're tied into Sony's ecosystem. You have to buy it from them. They're always more expensive. They never discount games. Right?
Well, they do, actually. See, that's another thing I have to push back on is I don't think PC games are cheaper that much anymore. And that's just consistently true. So it's like, no, I don't think they're going to overcharge you. I just, like, again, so an example, right? I got there were two examples recently. There was the Zombie Army 4 me and some friends got. And you know, when we're just drinking, playing on the couch, we don't really care what system we're gaming on. So we were like, well, which one's cheaper? And there was a Steam sale going on. And then there was, you know, I don't know, some PlayStation spring sale like a few months ago or whatever. And what they had is Zombie Army 4 was like $10 cheaper on the PlayStation. And in fact, Far Cry New Dawn also was $16 on their recent sale. And then the Ubisoft store a week later has a sale. And I'm like, I bet it's going to be cheaper there. Nope, same price on Ubisoft's own store. So I just don't think that argument. And again, for the people who,
I'm not making the argument that you think I'm making.
Oh, okay.
What I'm making is,
no, I'm just saying that also again. But go on.
Yeah. The argument I'm making is that if you have a drive, you can. We have a shop here called CEX. I don't know whether you have something similar in the US. Probably GameStop, realistically, but we have CEX, which
for now until it goes out of business. Go on.
Yeah, we have it sells all of your consumer electronics secondhand. So the way it works is like, you can go in with your phone. You go, how much you give me for this? They might give you store credit of maybe $300 for your phone, or they might give you, cash for maybe $250, and then they resell it. But they also do games, and they've hundreds and thousands of games in there. And like 2 years after Diablo was launched for console, Diablo 2 was launched for console, we were having a games night, and I just misplaced my copy of Diablo. We were going to play Diablo, and it was for Xbox 360, I think it was, and I went in and bought the full edition, whatever it was, for like £5. And you just go in, because it's secondhand, you go and you pop it and you play it and you install it. So I think that flexibility will be lost by the digital edition, which helps you into paying because they'll always be more expensive.
No, and I entirely agree with that too. I recently I say recently, it was probably 6 months ago now, got Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, and this is an example I use. It was new from Amazon for the PS4 Blu-ray, $7. Free shipping. And I'm just like, I'm keeping that disc drive if I get one anytime soon. Because it doesn't even need to be a used game, although that is a big deal. It's like the fact that they'll buy up a bunch of stock. If the game stops selling well, there has to be a sale. There's not going to be this arbitrarily raised price, I guess, unless it's a Nintendo game, because they insist on keeping their prices high. But so I don't know, though. I mean, here's what it comes down to, though. I'm not saying that. I just think that with this being in a recession right now, and again, I'm telling you, I think both consoles cost under $480 to make. And if they cost under that much to make, I see no reason why they would sell it for too much unless there's no competition. And there's definitely competition this gen. So I could see it going. And this is just my spiel. Again, I'm not confirming this or saying I have an inside source. This is my opinion that Sony will not say the price until Xbox says their price. And that's because they're willing to go crazy low with the digital version, I think, if they need to.
Yeah.
I think they want to put the disc version at 500, or honestly, I think they want to give it like a 1.6 terabyte drive and bundle in a controller charger and sell for $550. I actually think that's what they want to do with the disk drive. But they've got all of these, kind of like Ampere's announcement, right? Turing's announcement. They've got all of these different strategies probably pre-planned for pricing, and they're just waiting to hear the competition, which is why I would say Xbox, you should sell it as cheap as you can.
Yeah, what I will say is that I think that we've already seen the low bar for the Xbox One X, which is like 300 quid now. They've dropped the One X to 300 quid. So that's 300 quid. And now Microsoft and Sony are doing an expensive version and a cheap version, right? Both of them, turns out they're doing
maybe.
So that to me just says prices are going to be a little bit higher than people think they are. I'm not going with the ludicrous numbers like, you know.
Well, if Xbox sells it for $600, and there was a rumor that Xbox was considering $600, then I think Sony says, fine, ours is $600 too with 1.6 terabytes, and then the digital version's $500. I really do think it depends, right? I think that's where they're like, I agree with you that they want to sell it for more than before.
Yeah.
But they're just like, we can't, and that's something people don't like. Sony can't afford to lose, frankly. Like since they're restructuring, they've closed half of their businesses. It's like just PlayStation now for like 40% of their revenue, I believe, or even it might even be almost half, honestly, is PlayStation or PlayStation related. So it's almost like a Nintendo situation where Sony knows they have to nail it or their company's in major trouble.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they do. And I think that for me, I think that you can't underestimate the value you're getting, even if they are 700 quid. I think that's worth it. Genuinely, I do. Because the amount of, like, you're not going to build a PC for 700 quid. Last generation, you could build a 500 quid PC and it would perform like the console that you paid 500 quid for. This generation around, you're never going to...
Well, near the end of the gen, you could. Near the end of the gen. The beginning, it's like, you're not building a PS4 for $400.
You could get it in and around, like there was i3s with like 950s or something.
In my opinion, you could build one, because I remember doing that too, for like $550. That would have been around the performance of a PlayStation, but it doesn't have a Blu-ray drive. It doesn't come with a controller. It doesn't come with, so... Yeah.
But it's still...
It was much closer than now, though. I agree.
Yeah, now it's going to be like 1,000 quid gets you similar performance. Like, you're not going to get a Ryzen 3700X, 16 gigabytes of RAM, an SSD, an NVMe SSD, a terabyte NVMe SSD, and a 5700 XT, and a 500 watt power supply, and a decent case. You're just not going to get all that for under 1,000 quid.
Well, yeah, and that's also assuming that it actually is a full Zen 2 derived processor, which I'll just drop that hint that it might be a unified CCX as well, by the way. So, which although if it is, it's like, I don't know, and both of the consoles have their own kind of like later than RDNA2 derived parts of the graphics card as well, is what it sounds like. So it's very hard to say. I really think what you're going to see is a lot of like cross-platform PC games kind of run like they do on PC on the consoles, but there's going to be this game here or there where it just runs outrageously better. Like I think Digital Foundry mostly came to the consensus that Horizon footage they showed is probably actually what it's going to look like. Like when you saw those crabs walking on the fish, that's what it's going to look like, guys. Unfortunately, I will also get this in too. I am concerned how many games may still be 30 frames per second on console.
Yeah. I'm worried that, like, for me, from the start, I've been like, 10 teraflops is not a big deal compared to 12 teraflops, right? And now I'm like, is it the limitation not because of the GPU's performance and standard rasterized performance? So in other words, 10 teraflops is fine in terms of rendering a game the way we've always rendered.
I mean, for both consoles, to be clear, though, because they announced Assassin's Creed Valhalla is 30 frames, and I'm like, why?
But maybe like that's because
they'll run on 30 frames on PC anyways, maybe because it's a Ubisoft game.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Like, I just think that now I'm starting to feel like the Xbox is going to be ray traced better. It's just going to do ray tracing better. All right, that's what I feel, and I don't want that to be the case because I want to choose a console when they launch. I don't want to be ham-fisted by limited performance.
I don't think either will be either way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I initially felt. I know I'm seeing 30 frames per second 4K, and I'm seeing another one maybe doing. I've heard some things. Maybe do some of the releases that are 30 frames per second on one console, or dynamically switching resolutions, is going to be 60 frames per second locked on the other one. I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't place that many bets on it. I really think games are just going to kind of both look good and just a little different on both. That's honestly what I think, because especially when I heard they probably have different geometry engines, it's like, well, then one just might be better at streaming in assets and showing more polygons, and one might just have a slightly higher resolution sometimes. But that's the thing, is I think they're both going to do dynamic resolution. I think that's just common sense that most people playing on a TV, especially, if you're sitting 10 feet away, why would you lock it to 4K to, like, I guess for console fanboys to argue online that one's locked and one's not. But I would imagine you'd probably want them both to have dynamic resolutions bouncing somewhere between 1600p and 2160p.
Yeah, I think there also is a case for DirectML. We don't know how good it is, but that's definitely going to be on the Xbox. It's probably not going to be on the PS5. So
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
I'm not sure either, but it's definitely going to be on the Xbox. That's what we can say, and that might be very good for keeping 60 frames per second locked at 4K. But
again, and yet they announced Assassin's Creed at 30. So
I know, look, I completely agree with you.
So this is what bothers me, is I'm like, man, can these? I really think what my hope is that what happens is, and I want to be honest, like, when I played Horizon, I actually played that one on a base PS4, and when I played Death Stranding, that was the smoothest 30 frames I've ever seen. So I want to be clear that I think some games, if they can have really good motion blur and nail the frame pacing, look fine at 30 frames, as long as it's not like a fast-paced first-person shooter online, then it's kind of ridiculous. But I really think you're still going to have some third-party devs that aren't getting with the program and have this ridiculous frame rates. And then you're just going to have some that come out with like Cyberpunk, and it's just going to be 60 frames locked. And people will say, hey, Ubisoft, why do you suck? And it might affect their sales. And I'm really just hoping as we get into the middle of the generation, the developers will just realize that people want 60, and it's worth turning down some of the settings to at least get it close to a consistent 60 frames.
Yeah, or here's a wild idea, right? For your competitive shooters, maybe give people the options.
Yeah.
To do it themselves. Just a crazy thought, but you can do it on PC. Why not be able to do it on console? Also, I heard, and I don't know whether it's true, and I've said this before, that Xbox will support keyboard and mouse from the start. So that's a big.
Well, did you know that
Sony to do as well?
Zombie Army 4 also does? I didn't even know. I just saw it. I saw it in the menu, and it said mouse and keyboard, and I was like, "You're kidding me!" And I just picked up a mouse and keyboard and plugged it into the PS4. Worked fine, exactly like on PC. So I'm like, it's just the developers just got to get with the program. I'm just going to say it again. You're already doing it. Just do it, and you develop the game. I'm sure it has in the code mouse and keyboard support somewhere for when you were testing the game. Just give us mouse and keyboard support on both consoles. It's like, what is so hard, you guys?
Yeah. And I know the reason why they don't do it is because they don't want people with mouse and keyboard playing with people with controllers in competitive first-person shooters. Well, there's already options out there. We've seen with cross-platform, you're only with certain games, you're only allowed to go in, or even on Android devices, you see people who can use controllers.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
But they don't allow the controller people to play with the people who are using touch screens. Just do that. That's all you do, and there's no problem. Do you know what I mean? There's no problem. And I think it just allows.
Well, in most games, it probably doesn't make a difference anyways, right? Like a lot of games are single player or co-op. And I mean, frankly, I still use controller for plenty of multiplayer games, even on PC. Although I will say, playing Far Cry with controller, now I remember why I always use a keyboard and mouse with Far Cry. There's something about their controller controls where it's like so hard to hit something with a controller in Far Cry. But then I was playing Titanfall 2. And just like Battlefield, they let you adjust every little thing on the sticks, from outer dead zone, inner dead zone, acceleration. You can get it pretty damn accurate. So it's not as much of a disadvantage, I think, for most people as people would think. You just got to make devs stop putting these incredibly sluggish analog stick controls into some of their games where it just feels terrible, honestly, some games.
Yeah, like I was a big Diablo player, and I'm also a massive Mortal Kombat fan, a massive Soul Calibur fan, and for those games, using controller was like, especially for Diablo, like it's always been mouse and keyboard. That was a breath of fresh air to play that with a controller. It was so good. It was like something that you sit down with your four mates, and you're all playing on the same screen, and you're drinking a few beers, having a chat while you're playing it. It was just such a breath of fresh air to be able to do that. There are reasons to want to play with a controller, and to be honest, if I had an Xbox and it had mouse and keyboard support and a controller support, I'd probably be using the controller 90% of the time anyway.
Yeah, but
I just want the option.
Well, I think we've covered most things. Let's just rapid fire a few reader mails here before we close up shop. Jake Martin writes in, he says, do you guys think the new GPU architectures will actually start utilizing PCIe 4.0 speeds, or will it still not matter? What do you think?
No, but caveat, to be continued.
Right. I think it's almost, for me, the way I answer that is they do. I mean, right now, if you benchmark the 5700 XT in some of the newest games, in some settings, it's like 2% better. So I would make the pedantic argument that it already does. And that a lot of it comes down to it is about, are you using it correctly? Because I remember when the 7970 came out, that had 3.0 support. No game took advantage of it. But then I remember specifically Rise, what is it, that when they ported Rise something Rome from the Xbox to PC,
Rise Fall of Rome or something, was it?
Yeah, I think that was what it was. And it was like some insane performance drop off at like older PCIe gens. And it's like, oh, well, we did some tricks with the PCIe bandwidth because the consoles have 3.0. And, I think that's one of those things where it will matter in some games, actually. And I do think the next gen cards could be, so much stronger than what we have now. So again, but is it going to be like a thing where you're in 4K and it like you lose all, like probably not. But I think there's a situation where in 1080p, now it's a 10% difference in like 1 out of 10 games. I don't know. Lebo King Kilo writes in and he says, let me see here. In regards to VRAM, if you can cache more assets in your DDR4 or DDR5, bippity boppity, you'll just get a polygon boost or performance boost that the systems aren't getting right now. As far as apparently he's saying that's what I said. So he says, I just want to make sure I'm not hearing you wrong. Are you saying that is the direct method of comparison between high-end PCs eventually and how the consoles will run games? And what does this mean for 2700X and Navi 1 with a Sabrent SSD? Well, I think that is. I think my answer is yes. That's how and isn't that how they've always made up for it? That's how they made up for it with the PS360, which had so little RAM. But then they're like, well, we can just have a ton of RAM in our PCs and cache more data.
Yeah, I think that's like it's pretty much what we said before. Is how are they going to catch up with is they just have more RAM? And
what does this mean? Again, I think it's like people freak out when maybe they heard me say Sony says that 32 gigabytes in a fast SSD still has performance problems. It's like, yeah, but that game's not out now. Like, you guys got to understand that's like 2 years from now, and by then all of this stuff will be what, X6, X770 motherboards with Zen 4. Who knows what you'll be able to buy? That's why it's like That's why it's like, well, I don't rush out and like, so I need to get a Threadripper now. No. What game is using it right now?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the game is being optimized for console right now. Yeah, nobody's even tried to touch it and put it near, or realistically, properly put it near a PC yet. So chill out, relax. It will happen. Like, I think everybody's like, oh, what if I can't get my games? What if my precious new PC is now made redundant by this console that costs £700? You're going to be fine in the most part. I think you just won't be able to play Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank. But
you already,
you already can't. So.
And it's like, but then what does that mean for a third-party game? And it's like, it means you'll have a 20 teraflop card probably to make up for the fact that they're streaming in assets. That's what that means. But that, I don't think, NVIDIA had to decide, are we going to go all out, or are we going to have higher volume and a quicker launch? that's cheaper. And it's like, well, we'd rather keep our profit margins. But that's still, you know, because once you lower prices, maybe you can never get back to there for a while. But it's still going to be like, I mean, look how strong Ampere looks, guys. Iden writes in and he says, what do you think awaits us in the next generation of gaming, particularly in games like Battlefield? Can we expect more destruction, bigger maps, and more players? I think yes.
Yes.
I think that's easy.
Yes, in everything. Yeah. More ray tracing.
Yeah. Well, also consider MAG on PS3 had 256 players. So, so it's like, I mean, and it worked when they put together this complex squad system. But it's like, I don't think they're just going to take Battlefield and make it 256 players. I wouldn't be surprised if they increase player counts a little bit, actually. But I don't think it's that simple of just more. I think, again, like when you look at Ratchet and Clank and the fact that they were literally pulling in other levels instantly in front of you. It's like, well, now there's, and I also actually just, it's funny at that PlayStation reveal. It's like, how many games were there that involved instantly respawning and dying and like portals? It seemed like half of them just because now devs can actually do that.
Yeah, imagine instantly respawning, running through portals, being on other worlds. Imagine a game like Battle. Remember PlanetSide?
Yeah.
Yeah, imagine that where it's intergalactic and you can run for different planets, and you know
there's no loading. You're just actually going there.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine a space combat where you're in a fighter and you're fighting, and then all of a sudden you're down on the planet and you're landing and you're getting out and there's a full world loaded in front.
An actual full world, right? Yeah,
exactly. Like this, it's just limitless possibilities.
I remember that was rumored for Battlefront 3, remember? But then they shoehorned it into a PSP version of Battlefront, and they were like, it's because everyone wanted it. And it's like, really all you could do is there was one spaceship, and then there was a bunch of clouds, and then there was one city that was tiny. It's like, that's not really loading into a planet. You just kind of made a map look like you were in outer space in one part.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, imagine an entire Halo game where you don't have, like, that's the easiest way to conceptualize it. Imagine Halo 3 or whatever your favorite Halo game is, where you can go anywhere at any time with no loading, where you can literally jump out of the ship and you end up, because everything has a place in the world.
Well, and I was just playing Titanfall 2, and it's actually by the way, I just started it. I know I'm late to the party on that. That's a fantastic game. I'm only in like the first 10%, but like, it's funny. Like, it's a pretty open section, and then it's like, all right, let's go down this corridor, and then we did, and then it just started loading, and I'm like, oh, see, that's the thing they're going to get rid of. It was such a weird, abrupt loading screen, and I'm like, we really needed a screen, even though I'm in a hallway. Okay, that's, Well, Bootman writes in and he says, those favorite games I play are usually older games. So I go back to them still over most of the new ones. Games have better graphics every year for the most part, but I prefer better gameplay over eye candy. How do you guys see it? Great gameplay or eye candy? And don't go with balanced is good shit. Pick a side and argue. Well, I'm not probably going to argue, but like, how would you answer that question?
I take gameplay over eye candy any day of the week. However, I have gone back to different games in the past that I remembered as good and can't play them anymore because they look so shit. So
sometimes the gameplay doesn't hold up either, by the way.
Yeah. I've got splinters in my arse, I think, on this one. I'm sitting on the fence. Maybe we need to pick a side. But yeah, no, I take gameplay over visuals any day of the week.
Yeah, what I say always is, and this is another one where they might not like my answer, is I reject the premise of the question. Like the idea that you're choosing one, that's never really made sense to me. Like, because when I hear people go, for example, oh, Minecraft has bad graphics, but its gameplay is good. I'm like, I don't think it has bad graphics. I think it looks incredibly good when the sun rises, even the non-ray trace version. It's like, that's just how that game's supposed to look. Trying to make the most realistic game isn't the best graphics. It's just, what are you like a good example also is like, if you look at like the PS360 generation, where you have these games like Mass Effect and then like The Last of Us, like you'd say, well, you could technically make The Last of Us on PS2. No, you couldn't, because you're not getting those facial expressions across on a PS2. And that is part of the gameplay, even outside of cutscenes, is seeing their faces as they dart their eyes. Like, and I just don't. I mean, for me, the simple answer is if a game plays well, that's what I look for. I don't look for Like I started to get annoyed more and more when Call of Duty just turned into these like almost interactive cutscenes, I swear, where it's like, it didn't even feel like the explosions were happening because they were scripted. Yeah. And I always thought Battlefield was more impressive because when you play online and a building, a helicopter crashes into a building, well, that actually just happened in front of me.
Yeah. There's a dude in that helicopter.
But is that graphics though, or is that gameplay? Because I would argue that was actually gameplay.
Yeah, I agree. I think on a visual side of things, I think visuals should fit the theme of the game. Like if you look at cell shaded games and stuff, they all look amazing as well. They all look really good. Mm-hmm. But I think as long as I feel like I'm in the world, as long as I feel like there's nothing so absurd. Like Skyrim was beautiful, but the bugs in that game were so hilarious.
Yeah,
that you were ripped right out of the world. Do you know what I mean? To like, this is, I'm not as long as you feel immersed in the world, I think like my favorite game of all time is Halo Reach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that game, look at it today, it doesn't look amazing. It still looks decent, but the gameplay and all of the things you could do in the game, plus it looked good enough, I think was what made that game brilliant.
Well, yeah, Bungie's a studio that's always been really good. And I would actually say Naughty Dog is another good example as well, where they know what to do with the graphics to not go overly for realism. Like, I think Guerrilla is the best probably at making the most realistic looking graphics. Having said that, on the PS2, Killzone 1 did not age well in how it looked. It looked good at the time, but it certainly didn't age well because it was that old, frankly, just that old last gen console look, you know, like especially games on N64 that tried to have realistic graphics. Oh my God, have those not aged well? But, you know, and then you look at something like, if you look at Uncharted between PS3 and PS4, they made Drake less cartoony as the games went because they were able to, but they knew if they made him overly realistic early, it wouldn't age well. And I think like Bungie's very clearly been very good at that too, where they're like, we're going to make it look realistic enough, but if we're going to make, you know, we're going to make Master Chief look a little cartoony in the first one, because if we try to make him hyper realistic, it's just, you know, and so, you know, realistic, good, and the right graphics for the game are all different questions. And again, so to bring it full circle, I reject the premise that it's graphics versus gameplay. All of it influences how you feel when you're playing the game. And if they screw up, well, if they screwed up, it's not that the graphics were bad, it's that they ruined the gameplay with how they made the graphics look.
My opening statement on that question, I think I said exactly the same thing that you said, which is that I would always say that it has to be a good game first, but then I've gone back and played games that I thought were good, and I couldn't take it anymore. Like, just couldn't take the way it looked. Yeah, so.
Well, that's all of the reader mails. I think that's all of the subjects. I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? This is actually during technically my lunch break, so I got about 5 minutes.
Yeah, there were two topics that I wanted to maybe mention on this, so we've talked about really everything. So.
Yeah, and I'm glad, again, you know, I'm glad we had this, because it's like, I'm not ready to get some quantum engineer guy in here right now. I'm just frankly was exhausted this weekend, and I'm like, I think I still just want to talk about all of these rumors coming out with someone else. And you were the first one that came to mind, especially when I realized it's been a pandemic since we talked. And so now we've survived the apocalypse for now.
It's still alive. Yeah.
We'll see if we'll wait for World War III to happen or something, and then do another one. Probably.
Suppose, yeah. It's something catastrophic will have to happen. Trump will get reelected or something like that. So.
Ooh, careful! You're getting into politics, and now people are going to freak out. But
remember, I'm a European lefty. That's the way we roll. So.
Yeah. Again, I just. Lefties. Just because, and a lot of this was casual conversation and speculation, but it's like, you don't have to agree with anything he said. We're just trying to we're just trying to think. Exactly. And it's not about making you think. It's like, well, we're making each other think. And for some reason, you guys seem to find us entertaining. So hopefully you were entertained this time. But I don't know. I think it's nighttime for you. So I guess have a good evening. The following podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcast, videos, articles, and other media. However, Moore's Law is Dead is a team. with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and select technical editing by Carbon Cry. You can find all of our information, including how to get a hold of us, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. And if you are a fan and would like to send mail or other hardware, please mail parcels to Moore's Law's Dead, P.O. Box 10468, Peoria, Illinois 61612. And speaking of fans, without exaggeration, the patrons are solely responsible for the continued distribution of the content you just listened to. And so if you have some extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you. I am one of them. The Discord is only at $1, and at higher tiers, you get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the back catalog of Flyover States podcast, thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts, and other perks as well. And if you cannot afford to support us, please just share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media and Reddit. And give Broken Silicon and Flyover States a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. All of this really does help so much more than I think anyone realizes. If you'd like to advertise on the podcast or a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its fans supporting it. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels. Bootman, Carbon Cry, Dean, Benny Berlin, Justin Yacht, Thomas Rupp, I Love You, Lynn and Jim, Bollocks, Jordan Betcher, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Lau, James Krasta, Justin Parrish, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Brad Medlin, Phil S., Thyrister the Ninth Dude, Greg Renegar, John Bible, Chrysantine, Night Rogue 77, The Mechanical Philosopher, Lebo King Kilo, Fatboy Diesel, Daniel Hyde, Matthew McMullen, Christoph Novak, Neil X01, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, Sexy, VI Pass, Sadler, Richter Gohagon, Elethros, Telos, Caden Picknell, Greg T. Wanchek, Jacob Barber, Xo, Tiwani Care Bear, Matthew Lane, Paul Jones, Jan Rauner, Rubber Ducks, Drita Full, Ali Robertson, HardForRoom.com, Jonathan, Job, Evan Dingle, Nick Neasy, Dominic Dewart, Harold P. Bureau, Wayne, Sam MacArthur, Total Silo, TSPCFS, Michael Costa, Andrew S., Blake, Aaron Keith, AJ Klein, Endless Logins, Hector Santana, Justice Brennan, Archon 971, Trevor Powers, Garrick Scholl, Alinya, Joshua Staveness, Daniel Nishbal, Franco Frederic, Hardware Numbers, and Alex Carastillo. And thank you to Sahara for the music.